Welcome everyone. In case you're just joining, feel free to throw your name, pronouns, and organization or affiliation into the chat. Um, we are so excited that you are here today for today's training, Food Systems and the Impacts of Climate Change. My name is Katie Collins. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a manager on the Community Health Training Institute. And this free training is offered through the Community Health Training Institute and is funded by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And it's brought to you in partnership between DPH and HRIA, or Health Resources in Action. We're excited for today's content prepared by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and hope that you will leave with a better understanding of the connections between food systems and the impacts of climate change, especially on food access and food distribution. For those of you who have to leave the training a little early, please message my colleague Victoria so she can send you our training evaluation link. We'll touch on this more at the end, but we encourage everyone to fill out the 5-minute survey to help us continue strengthening our programming, ensuring that our trainings meet your needs. So thanks in advance for your feedback and for your presence here today. We do have a live captioner with us, so if you would like to see captions, please look for the CC Live Transcript button on the bottom of your toolbar. Click it and then click Enable Auto Transcription. You can also go into Settings and to the Accessibility section to enable captions always. And now, without further ado, I think that's it for me. I will pass the mic over to our facilitator from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, Rachel Weil.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. I hope you are staying warm and dry. My name is Rachel Weil, and I am a food systems planner at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. We are a regional planning agency, one of 13 in the state, and our region is the Greater Boston area, 101 cities and towns around Boston. I am joined by my colleague Barry Keppard, who is our Director of Public Health, and he'll be helping with some of the engagement pieces of today's session. So just want to thank everyone for being here. Please throw your name and organization in the chat so we can get a sense of everyone who's here. Really appreciative of the reception to this training, and I think it's an acknowledgement of the importance of this topic and the timeliness. So that we can move on. So I want to frame this training by acknowledging that there are infinite impacts of climate change on the food system. I hope to present a few examples of those impacts in our region, shine some light on the resilience building work across the state, and share resources in an engaging way where you all can participate. This won't really be a lecture. I know a lot of you hold a lot of expertise, and I see folks from MDAR, from a lot of food policy councils, so there will be points of engagement along the way today so that we can learn and hear from you. So with that said, here's our agenda. We will kind of level set with an intro to climate and food systems. We will then look specifically at our Massachusetts food systems and what the climate change impacts have been and are projected to be on a few of the sectors within the food system. We'll talk about resilience and look at a few examples, and then we'll wrap up and I'll be sharing a lot of the resources that we'll be discussing at the end. So next slide, please. So for our intro, I'm just gonna kind of go through a few definitions that you are probably pretty familiar with to start us off, just so we're all on the same page. So what is a food system? Simply put, a food system encompasses everyone and everything it takes to get food to your plate. Food system is all the processes that go into producing, transporting, consuming food, as well as the workers and the many elements involved as a food item goes from farm or sea to table. This is a diagram from the New England Feeding New England initiative. It uses 2022 data to kind of depict the different sectors in our New England food system, which supports around 1 million jobs and over $190 billion in sales. Massachusetts specifically employs about 460,000 people and generates over $85 billion in sales. And these are economic impacts that are easily measured. Obviously, there are many additional impacts not calculated by this analysis. And in addition, there's a lot of other data that's important to the food system, like the number of our Massachusetts and New England residents that are experiencing food insecurity, which they do have here on the left-hand side. All right. So want to kind of pause for our first engagement opportunity of the session. I'm wondering what part or parts of the food system you are involved in. There's a lot of different options here. Please select all that apply. There should be a poll popping up. I hope that everyone selects eating food as one. That is kind of indicative of how we are all tied to the food system in a profound way. Seeing a lot of responses come in. This is great. A lot of eating food. All right. Awesome. Well, we will continue to have this poll open for a little bit longer, but definitely the eating food is the most popular. Seems like we have a lot of people supporting food access, which is great. Growers, making food, whether that's chefs or manufacturers. That's awesome. Food policy. Great. So a lot of different food parts of the food system represented here. So thank you all for joining and weighing in. All right, next slide, please. So we're not going to go into a ton of definitions or technical descriptions of climate change because of the short amount of time, but just wanted to share this kind of breakdown between weather and climate. Weather is the short-term state of the atmosphere, changes within minutes or hours. 1 minute it's 80 degrees and sunny, and the next it's downpouring. Where long-term patterns of weather are climate is what we're referring to when we say climate. And this Union of Concerned Scientists map shows the different scenarios, climate change scenarios for Massachusetts and what our climate could look like in comparison to other states. All right, so you all obviously have an interest in this subject by joining this meeting and would love to kind of think about or hear why you think we should focus on food and climate change. So feel free to put answers in the chat. Here's some cute pictures of kids gardening. Oh, oh, did we close the poll? Sorry. Okay, great. Thank you. I think for me, food and climate change, the food system is so impacted by climate change in so many ways, big and small. It can really depend on where you're looking from to kind of identify uh, that reason for engaging with the food system and climate change. But I wanted to just share a couple of the impacts of climate change on the food system as a starting point for this conversation and how we can start thinking about those impacts and why it's important.
And we have a couple awesome share outs of why focus on food and climate change in the chat, including like how the climate change impacts what we can grow, how we're able to improve overall community well-being given these changes, that it's a human right to access food and that it's culturally relevant, and how do we continue to be able to offer culturally relevant food to folks, and how it's going to affect future generations. So many different thoughts in the chat from our attendees here.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks everyone. These are really great reflections and reasons to engage with food systems and climate change and think about how we can create resilience in our food system. All right, next slide, please. So these are some of the ways that climate change affects food systems very broadly. There is not an exhaustive list, but just wanted to kind of start our conversation here. So food production, there are a number of ways that climate change can impact food systems or food production. Changing environmental conditions like extreme heat and drought affect air and water quality and soil health, and this then affects agricultural productivity and crop yields. Pressures like loss of pollinators, extreme storms, invasive species also introduce uncertainty and can affect food production and agricultural productivity. Then you have things like coastal ecosystem disruption, invasive species in aquaculture that um, affect um, our fisheries, and occupational health and safety concerns, thinking about extreme heat and farm workers, conditions with power outages in different workplaces. We can think about food access being affected in many different ways by climate change, disruptions in supply chains, which we saw in COVID, can lead to increase in prices and an increase in food insecurity. Food safety is one of the impacts of climate change. The spoilage and bacterial contamination that are associated with high temperatures and risk of power outages. And we have food quality as well can be affected, the nutritional value of food when we have those disruptions in supply chains or agricultural productivity. And taste as well can be affected. All right, so we have another chat question coming up. Where do you see climate change impacting your food systems work? Take a minute here for answers in the chat. Extreme weather situation affecting crops. Food quality. Climate resilience strategies with farmers. And adaptation strategies. Diverse spaces to grow. less availability of produce, higher prices, food bank supply chains, immediate food needs. Yes, these are um, all important impacts that it sounds like folks are seeing already in their work on a day-to-day. So thank you for sharing those. Saving seeds, that's a good one as well. All right, so thank you all for sharing how you're seeing climate change show up. Wanted to share some of the risks on food systems in Massachusetts that we're already seeing impacted. And some of these you've kind of covered in our chat just now. As an overview, we have the Massachusetts Climate Change Assessment that came out in 2022. This really breaks down the impacts of climate change across the Commonwealth by region. We have these unique priority impacts identified for each region with these little icons here. And many of these impacts are on the food system. For example, there's coastal flooding. That's a particular threat to food distribution centers on the north and south shores. This can lead to supply chain issues and unavailability of food. In the Connecticut River Valley, decreased agricultural productivity could result from temperature increases and again lead to those supply chain disruptions and loss of crops for farms. This assessment was followed up by the Resilient Massachusetts or Resilient Mass action plan, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that outlines recommended actions for each of these impacts. But we are fortunate to live in a state that really has dug into what climate change has done and can and might do in our in the near future. Next slide, please. All right, so we're gonna talk about a couple different sectors and how they are affected by climate. We'll start with farms and fisheries. And we'll start with trivia. So I would love to know which of these following Massachusetts grown foods has been impacted by climate change.
And Rachel, this is Barry. Come off mute for a second too. As we get folks' responses, I think we can end the poll and share the poll. I think last time maybe not everybody saw the results. So just a note for us to do that when everybody enters.
Thanks, Barry. All right, I will go ahead and end the poll now. You were all right. It is all of the above. We can go to the next slide. So we have a very diverse agricultural sector here in the Commonwealth and have had a number of different impacts affect growers and our fisheries in the last couple of years. So I wanted to share a couple examples of those. Torrential rains in July 2023 hit Massachusetts farms hard, particularly in Western Massachusetts. They drowned fields of tomatoes, squash, and zucchini, and other crops, and farms really suffered from that extreme rain event. Also in 2023, we saw sub-zero temperatures in February after several warm days in January killed Massachusetts peach buds. for that year. Some farms lost all of their peach crops, which was obviously a huge hit to farmers in the local economy. We see that more extreme heat in the summer and warmer winters with less ice and wild fluctuations between that heavy rain and drought are taking a toll on cranberry plants here, pushing the growing season to a later date and increasing unpredictability. And lastly, we have rising ocean temperatures that have caused key ocean fisheries such as cod and lobster to decline, south of Cape Cod mostly. The loss of coastal wetlands can also harm other commercially important fish like clams, and acidification can threaten crustaceans like scallops. So those are a couple of the effects on our farms and fisheries. And yes, zucchini, a call out to zucchini. I am growing zucchini still in October, which is a new one for me. So maybe that's why I focused on it. All right, so we'll jump now to nutrient management. And we're going to again have a trivia question for you all. What percent of US food ends up in landfills? 10%, 33%, 50%, 66%? All right. I am seeing a lot of the right answers, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And the correct answer was 33%. So a lot of you got that right. We have a 30, sorry, addressing wasted food has huge climate potential. You can go to the next slide, please. About a third of food produced is never eaten and often ends up in landfills. I know someone mentioned food waste in the chat as an important consideration with climate change. Landfills emit methane, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas. And so diverting food waste, excuse me, from landfills through food rescue or food recovery, where surplus edible food is recovered for consumption, is important. We can also think about compost as a way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and increase and think about generally diverting food from landfills and towards recovery if it's suitable for consumption as a way to increase food security. Massachusetts is actually a leader in diversion. We have a ban across the state, which promotes businesses and institutions to think about food recovery and compost, and bans the landfilling of food waste for businesses and institutions that produce more than a half ton of food waste per week. So by 2030, the state's goal is to divert 780,000 tons of food waste per year. We've been written up as a national leader in Science Magazine. So we're doing well on this front, but there's still a long way to go.
We have a question in the chat. How often is food waste percentage tracked in Massachusetts, if you know?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. Does anyone else in the group know? That's a great question. I will look into that, Cynthia. I think what I have heard is that enforcement of the ban is kind of budget dependent, and I think enforcement is where some of that tracking happens. So thanks for that question. Wonder if restaurants are included. I believe they are. I'm assuming, Karen, you're asking about the ban, and I think it's any business or institution that produces over a half ton of food waste per week. So I think maybe some of the larger restaurants, that would apply to. And folks, feel free to chime in with any of these questions, especially those of you that work on these issues directly. Thank you. All right, we're going to next jump to food distribution, and surprise, we'll have another trivia question. How many Massachusetts residents participated in SNAP in 2024? 1 in 10, 1 in 8, 1 in 6, or 1 in 4? Okay, great. Again, a lot of you got this one correct. It's 1 in 6, so about 16% of our state population participated in SNAP last year. Okay. So we are going to focus in on food insecurity because of all the different effects of climate change that can kind of impact food security. So food insecurity is when people don't have enough to eat and don't know where their next meal will come from. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that definition. Like COVID-19, climate change is a risk magnifier of existing problems and vulnerabilities. So we can think about the COVID-19 pandemic, the supply disruptions that expose the risk of food systems to these global supply chains, and also think about the climate change driven hazards that can disrupt food production and distribution and thus impact food security. Next slide, please. So we can look at food insecurity in a number of different ways. The data I'm sharing here is from the USDA Household Food Security Report from the census. We are going to be experiencing a greater challenge in thinking about this data and understanding it because this report was recently canceled by the administration. So understanding the true prevalence of food insecurity is going to be a challenge. However, we can look at some of the patterns of food insecurity in Massachusetts during the pandemic to kind of have an indicator of what could happen with climate change disruptions. Pre-pandemic, the state was at about 8% of the population experiencing food insecurity. It peaked in May 2020, around 20% of the population experiencing food insecurity. And as of last September, it was around 18% experiencing food insecurity. Again, this is census data, which can be tracked back, I think, about 30 years. They've been collecting this information. So it is a really difficult position to be ending this data now, especially when food insecurity is so high. You may have heard about the 1 in 3 households experiencing food insecurity, that data point from the Greater Boston Food Bank. I use the census data in this comparison just to have a more of a historical comparison here. But I think there's, again, with the cancellation of this data, this report, we'll have to think about the best way to understand this prevalence going forward. We can think about the effects of COVID-19 on food security and the populations who experienced higher levels of food insecurity as an indicator of those at risk of climate-related food insecurity. So here you can see in this chart, the Massachusetts households with children by race and ethnicity. This is from early 2024. You can see that Black, Latinx, multiracial households experienced higher levels of food insecurity than white or Asian households. Climate change exacerbates these inequities as it disrupts an already inequitable food supply. And similarly, LGBTQ plus individuals were found to face a higher level of food insecurity in Massachusetts. And seniors who are more likely to be isolated or less mobile are also at higher risk for food insecurity due to climate disruptions. So I think we can learn from these experiences in COVID and strengthen programs that center those with lived experience in food insecurity to bolster community resilience to climate change. Next slide, please. All right, gonna throw it back to you all again. Would love to hear how you're planning for these changing conditions, and how you can bring past experiences like with COVID or drought to inform planning going forward. So feel free to take a moment to add your input here in the chat and what you've done to plan for these changing conditions. Collecting more resilient seeds, less heirloom varieties, locally supplied growing and food, or locally grown food and supplying food locally. Planning for uncertainty. Non-perishable bulk food and freezing food. Encouraging urban agriculture, coalition building, education about climate change, strengthening partnerships between farming and food pantries. That's a great one. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Keep them coming. We'll move ahead here, but appreciate everyone's sharing about how they're thinking about disruptions and planning for climate change. Next slide, please. All right, so we've talked a lot about the impacts, and you've all started this conversation about resilience off very nicely, so thank you. What I'll do now is share a couple examples that I'm aware of local initiatives promoting resilience, and also talk about different ways we could look at resilience, because I think it's a word that's thrown around a lot now, and there are different ways to kind of think about what actions and activities contribute to resilience to climate change. So resilience can take many shapes. It can look like building infrastructure to manage and prevent damage. It can look like regional collaboration to bolster food production. It can also result from food systems work. The definition that the Union of Concerned Scientists provide for climate resilience is about successfully coping with and managing the impacts of climate change while preventing those impacts from growing worse. So both types of resilience building are important and will better protect our communities from the impacts of climate change. And let's look at a couple examples of different types of building resilience. So we can talk about building resilience into the food system, and one local example comes from the Island and River Flood Resilience Project, which is a collaborative effort between the cities of Chelsea and Everett to build a coastal storm surge barrier to prevent flooding from the Island End River. Most notably, it will protect the New England Produce Center, which is that big white building outlined by the purple line there. This produce hub serves 8 million people across 6 states, so it's really an important food access point. The project team working on this estimates that along with jobs, wages, and habitat protection, it will prevent $570 million in healthcare costs related to food insecurity. This project was in jeopardy due to FEMA cuts, but state, local, and community support came to the rescue, and it's, I think, in permitting phase right now, which is very exciting. All right. We can also talk about building resilience through food. So the city of Cambridge hosts a community iftar, which is a daily meal celebrated to break the fast of Ramadan. You might be thinking, how is this resilience? Building community through shared meals and culture builds resilience through stronger connections. And this is really just one example of many shared meal programs that exist in our region, trying to bring people to the table and in community with each other. I'm sure you all can share many others that are in your communities, and I think especially in the time of SNAP cuts and the ending of many other federal programs and supports, building these community spaces and community connections are even more important to building that resilience and sharing resources. All right. I also wanted to touch on a couple plans, one of which I've mentioned, but I wanted to share some of the regional and state plans that address building resilience into our food system. We have the Resilient Mass Plan that I mentioned earlier. That was a response to the climate change assessment in 2022 from the state. It is a statewide plan to build resilience and supports different actions across the Commonwealth, and has a number of actions that are specific to food systems, including prioritizing food security projects and grant support that partner food security and climate change mitigation. The plan recommends a farm climate resiliency program and farmland prioritization tool. And I know a number of these actions that were recommended in 2022 are in the process of being realized at different stages currently, so that is exciting. We also have the New England Feeding New England plan, which was released in 2023. It's a 10-year initiative to prepare the region for system shocks, such as climate-related weather events and public health emergencies. You can participate in the local food counts that this initiative hosts where it's that first slide that we saw that was taking into account the entire system and the agricultural production, wages, jobs, all of the different economic impacts of the food system. The organization does a local food count. I'm not sure what the frequency is, but every couple of years to better understand where the food system is at in that way. There are a couple other plans and programs out there that I want to give a shout out to. The New England Food Vision, which was conducted in 2013, I believe, or maybe a little later. It's a set of recommendations on regional resilience premised on the right to healthy, accessible food for all. It includes recommendations for increased resilience from all sectors of the food system, including food sector worker wages and access to healthy food. We also have MDAR's Climate Smart Ag program, helping farmers transition to sustainable approaches to soil management, and the Agricultural Soil Health Program, and a number of other programs from MDAR that are encouraging sustainable practices and supporting farmers to transition that way. All right. Next slide, please. So that is the end of the presentation. And I would love for folks to take a look at the resource list that we'll send out later. And actually we can, put here. I've just thrown a bunch of the links that I've shared into the chat, or sorry, into the slides that in the Google slides that Victoria just shared in the chat. Would love for you to also add any of the resources that you're aware of. There are so many things happening out there that it was hard to kind of capture in this 1 hour training. And I know that many of you are really engaged in this work, and we want to make sure the word gets out about what you all are doing and what you all have heard about going on out there. So feel free to add add resources to the slides. They're organized by topic, so take a look. All of the links from this presentation should be in those slides as well. So really just I'm grateful for you all showing up today and looking to stay connected and kind of build out this work. This is a newer aspect of the work at MAPC, and we're trying to figure out kind of how we can be supportive as a regional planning agency and how we can connect to you all who are doing the work and promote it and find ways to fund it. I see a question about are grants available? Would love to hear from folks that are more connected to the funding aspect of this work, if there are grants currently available for this work. I think Karen, it might be helpful if you're a little more specific about what in the kind of range of food system and climate work you're looking at to get funded. Thank you, Rebecca.
And Rachel, since we still have time, can people use the raise hand function if they have questions that they want to jump in and share with the group?
Absolutely. Thanks, Barry.
Amazing. Seeing some funding sources thrown in the chat as well. We'll make sure if you don't add things into the resource doc, we will also make sure that we capture anything from the chat and add that in before we send it out to you all. So much getting
Thanks for
thrown in.
flagging that the funding opportunities. I think that's a really important piece, and we can add a whole nother slide in those resource slides with all of these opportunities, especially given the cuts to many of the federal programs right now.
I'm curious
Agreed.
if folks have any reflections on like either something new that you learned today or something that you want to do in your work after listening to this presentation. Yeah, so if any folks have reflections, something you learned or something you want to do or implement after listening to today's training. And that could even just be connecting with some of the folks in this room or some of the resources that were just shared.
I know there are a number of different organizations doing work in this space and kind of or tangential to this space, but would love to hear how, if folks are involved in groups specifically working at this intersection of food systems and climate, so other folks can plug in. Nancy. Nancy, I think you're muted.
Mute, okay.
There you go.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great, okay. No, a lot of this information was great and really new for me, and I know it's a hot topic, so I was glad to see the information to the forefront. And I'd like to look at the links after the presentation, so the chat with all the references and resources, for future networking. Right now, I'm recovering from a bike accident, but either with work or projects or volunteering, I certainly would like to get on board.
Amazing.
So no, a lot of it was brand new, and so I know there's a lot of co-ops and a lot of local stuff, but to see it, the effects in a full picture, it was great to see that. And so I can, help and participate to help leave the planet a better place when my time comes and stuff.
Thank you, Nancy. We'll definitely be sharing those links so you can kind of investigate further and find different opportunities. But thank you for joining and for your passion, and I hope you're healing well from your.
Yeah. Good luck on the recovery. I agree that it was really helpful to like be grounded in some of those definitions again, even though some of you all are familiar with this work. Some of us are less so, and so the definitions always help get us all on the same page. I loved the map too. And like seeing what things were specifically affecting different regions. I'm probably going to go back and look at that more in depth after this. Okay, so I'm going to start closing us out, but please feel free to hop off mute or throw things into the chat if folks have other reflections. Rachel and Barry, thank you so much for joining us today. This was incredibly informative and certainly gave me a lot to think about, and hopefully everyone who attended. Victoria is going to drop the link to our feedback survey into the chat now. As mentioned at the beginning, we really value your input here, everyone who attended. It helps us to continue bringing free trainings to this community about things that are important to you all, relevant, and things of that nature. So please take 2 to 3 minutes to fill that out and let us know what you thought. In addition to that, yeah, the feedback form link is in here and the QR code is on the screen. Victoria, do you want to go back to the other slide really quickly as well? So if you or your organization wants us to spotlight something that you have going on, whether it's an event, a resource, a training opportunity, or community event, feel free to let us know and we will spotlight it in our LinkedIn and on our newsletter and our website. So feel free to fill out that spotlight form and we will help amplify whatever it is that you are trying to get out to the community. We do record our trainings. And so if there's trainings that you're interested in revisiting or just want to browse the training library, the link is that second QR code here. So please feel free to browse our training library and follow us on LinkedIn for updates on trainings and other public health resources, job and funding opportunities, and the like. We will probably spotlight some of those funding opportunities that were shown in the chat over the next couple of weeks. And then in terms of trainings, if you liked this one, our next one is coming up on November 20th at 1 p.m. It's an hour and a half, and it's about foundations of public health, really focusing in on the core functions, services, and values of public health, along with key historical milestones, ethical foundations of public health, and the national frameworks that kind of shape our public health field today. So yes, Victoria is going to pop that registration link in now to the chat, and we will also follow up with that after the fact in case you miss it. So yeah, feedback form is on the screen now, and then the next training registration link is in the chat from Victoria. And I think that is everything that I wanted to follow up with. Another huge thank you to Rachel for pulling this training together. We packed a lot into this hour and we're really grateful for your work developing this, and Barry for your input and support here today as well. Thank you, everyone. If you have questions and want to linger longer, we will stay until the end of the hour, but otherwise, I release you back into your days.